Season 2 was very experimental, which was fun for us to find our footing, and also somehow had a theme.
We had some cool uncles, cool grandpas, greenwashing, storytelling, balance. We had youth perspective. It really ended up being a season that had some continuity, even though we were just testing and experimenting, and have a personal big announcement. So stick around to the end to hear that.
Certainly, creating a warm and engaging introduction for your podcast, consider Green Tony as a suggestion that combines an upbeat and inviting spirit without any background music. Welcome to Tangelic Talks, your go-to podcast from Tangelic, where we dive into the vibrant world of clean energy, development, sustainability, and climate change in Africa. We bring you inspiring stories, insightful discussions, and groundbreaking innovations from the continent making waves in the global community. Tune in and join the conversation toward a brighter, greener future. Let's get started.
Welcome to Tangelic Talks, a podcast at the intersection of energy, equity, and empowerment with your co-host Victoria Cornelio and myself, Jensen Cummings. In today's episode, we are recapping season 2. We're going to tease the tease of season 3, and I have a personal big announcement, so stick around to the end to hear that cliffhanger. There you go. All right, season 2.
It was a wild one.
Season 1 happened really fast for us because when we started, we had a whole bunch of guests lined up. Season 2, we had to scramble a little bit and figure out what kind of show we wanted to be. Test out some new models. You're going to hear about some different models of shows that we've done. And we did some solo episodes. We kind of felt out the type of guests, started planning for season 3. So it's very like evolution. I feel like season 2s often are the evolution of any given show. So it was exciting for sure. Any overarching thoughts before we break down each episode and kind of our takeaways?
Season 2 was very experimental, which was fun for us to find our footing, and also somehow had a theme. And we just didn't expect it.
Yeah,
kind of quite cool.
Greenwashing.
Yeah.
Basically became like the overarching theme because we were also learning how to navigate this space as storytellers and for the podcast itself. And for us to understand like what type of stories we want to be telling, what type of stories are needed out there, what type of voice and narrative style, and how we edit those things, how we show up, all those things were really important. So it was really good. So we started season 2 looking behind the scenes a little bit. We talked marketing in the green sector with our own Toufiq, who people finally got to see out front of the camera because he is behind the camera running things for us, making sure that we look and sound right. Anything you've seen from social media, from the website, from branding, Toufiq has had his hand on that. So what was your top takeaway getting to speak with Toufiq?
It's really interesting because I think this happens with coworkers where it's like, you know a lot about them now, in the now, and you don't really know how they came to be your coworker or why they're here. And something I found really interesting was that, like, he was talking about green certification. He used to work in that kind of industry in hospitality, and having green certification sparking the want to work in the sector because he was like, what is a green certification? Like, what does that even mean? And then we were talking about greenwashing without even knowing it.
Yes. It started in episode 1. We just didn't have a name for it yet. We were just kind of fumbling around in the dark, trying to have an interesting conversation with Toufiq.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. For me, learning about his origin story is great, especially that we both have hospitality backgrounds was just kind of unique and connected us even further. His drive for balancing storytelling with like data and facts, I think is the most compelling thing about him specifically.
Yeah.
And the most challenging thing in this space, and that we've seen for Tangelic, as we have kind of a technical team that's been working on crunching these big numbers and these big systems and programs. And then over here, us trying to connect on a human level and tell those stories, connect with our audience, with people in the field, with funders, with grants, foundations, all these different things. And it's really complicated and confusing. And Toufiq continuously bringing us back to both of those points of balance. I was really impressed, have been impressed, and to hear him articulate that was really nice to get him to have that opportunity, because I think it even crystallized it even more for him, being able to kind of speak it into the world.
100%. Yeah, he's a really good bridge of that, of the two sides of Tangelic, and, you know, being behind the scenes, making all that shine for the public. So incredibly grateful for Toufiq. We are.
Toufiq. He's the magic man behind the scenes. Love it.
Yeah.
All right. So then our next episode, we went and talked to Megha Fadke, who is legal tools to fight climate change. She's a 23-year-old kind of whiz kid, attorney working in this space. What were you hearing? What were you learning from Megha specifically?
I mean, climate litigation has always amazed me. It fascinates me. It's so weird because, it's one of those things that are so human. Like nature would have never come up with.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So it was amazing to get an insight into how social that process is. It's one of those things that you kind of know, but the way that we fight climate change in the courts is from a human perspective because climate change affects us humans. There is a social thing there, and seeing her articulated in so many different ways. She's been around, she's seen so many things. She's so young and been part of so many projects. And at the end, all she kept going back to was like that social value of it all. It goes down to the communities and the people actually affected by the litigation going on, and that storytelling again, So that was really cool. But I don't know what you think.
I liked how she already was an old soul. That came up multiple times as we also had kind of greenwashing and thinking about the storytelling mechanism of this green sector. And also there was a big youth perspective.
Yeah.
Right? And so you've brought that throughout the show. And I'm an elder millennial. I'm not ancient. I'm not a boomer, but also just having the youth perspective is different from a millennial perspective to a Gen Z to Alpha all the way down. And so I thought that was interesting. The balancing act again was there of the storytelling versus the law. How are we connecting like the penal code and policy? How are we connecting these different aspects? And it's not always the legal argument that kind of wins the day. It's often the better story that wins the day. And that was very unique to hear from an attorney perspective, because I just feel like they'd be so tethered to the law versus the storytelling aspect, but it makes a lot of sense, especially if you're making that argument in court. So that really stood out to me, was again the balance of storytelling and kind of the youth perspective and the experience of how much experience that Megha had. All right, I totally skipped, and that was episode 3 of season 2. So my bad. But do check out that episode. The second episode of season 2 was actually our first kind of roundtable discussion. And so we connected with Arizona State University, and they offered up a PhD student who became a doctor like the day before, right? And then a master's student as well. So we got to talk to Tam Kimambonta and Madison Harris, who are at ASU. We had a great roundtable discussion. We kind of broke it into 3 parts. We talked about energy access, we talked about critical minerals, and we talked about degrowth debate. Those are kind of the 3 sections we talked about. So break it down a little bit. What were your takeaways?
It was so cool. I think it was a new format for us doing a roundtable discussion. So that was really fun, kind of getting different perspectives on the same topic. I think is always a good way of expanding a conversation. But also during the planning process, I remember we had this first talk with them of what are we going to talk about, and energy access came up. And it just reminded me, on our first episode with Dr. O'Toole, we were talking about just transition, and he was like, what are we talking about? And that just kind of reminded me of like, sometimes we get so ahead because we are so enmeshed in this area that Dr. Kimambonta was able to bring us back and be like, if we're going to have this discussion, we have to start with energy access. And I think that really laid the groundwork for us to go from there in the actual discussion, touching on every point till we got to degrowth. So that was really fun. I think it was super cool. And it was cool to be part of the panel too. I got to nerd out a bit with them. So that was fun.
Yeah, it was great. You didn't have to stay more in your host mindset. I played the moderator, and you were able to get into your field a little bit more. And I could tell there was just a unique energy about that, where you got to really expound on those thoughts that you sometimes just tease in there, and then you ask the next question for the guest. You were able to like really get into your zone, which I appreciated. Maybe the most about that, seeing you kind of shine in that way, was really, really great for me personally. And I think it represented the show and that episode really well. And being able to talk to Dr. Kimambonta right after getting, accepted for his doctorate was an amazing experience as well. Madison talking about critical minerals, which we've talked about on the show before. So getting that perspective and a different perspective, right, than we had in the episode before. So it was really, really nice to kind of see how each of you took your story and kind of ran with it. What it made me feel the most is that our future is in good hands. Number one takeaway for me. I was like, the level of thinking, creativity, and urgency and earnestness that like this needs to happen, and we are going to be the ones to make it happen. Taking that mantle and taking that responsibility, that to me says, okay, we're in good hands. You know, generationally, we've messed things up for quite a while. You're going to be the first generation to make a net positive impact on nature in this way for a long, long, long time. So that was big takeaway there. Great episode.
Yeah, it was really
Dave,
fun.
with the youth perspective in episode 4 of season 2, and we talked to Queen.
Yeah.
Who, like Toufiq, only needs one name. And Queen is also a part of the Tangelic team. Just absolutely dynamic young leader, right? We talked about kind of women and youth empowerment and leadership in climate action. Queen, I'm going to jump in first. Queen is like an old soul.
Yeah, she's like Megha in that way. So
Even
young
just
and so much experience.
Her voice is so slow and deliberate, and it feels so wise and ancient in this way.
I love it.
And then she's speaking at these conferences, you know, G20 and these different things around Africa, especially. And she's, you know, based in Lesotho, in South Africa, encompassed in South Africa. To be the youngest speaker at many of these conferences and to hold the stage and hold the mic in the way that Queen does, impressive.
100%. And I think also she shared in the episode that a lot of times she'll be in rooms and panels where her being so upfront might, you know, ruffle some feathers or might get some people side-eyeing. And it was really funny because the behind the scenes of that is she kind of put on her hat and she was ready to go. And I love that because she kind of explained it as a way of you get into character and you don't care because you have a mission, you have something that you've got to say and you got to say it. And I love that. It's so cool. It's one of those things like you see in movies where people like, you know, flip a switch and they're in character. It was awesome.
I mean, it's literally like a Superman, since that movie is so hot right now. It's like a Superman spin in the phone booth. She like puts on a cape and comes out in superhero.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Like ready to take on any of these, you know, boomers or the powers that be or whatever label is slapped on somebody who's in a position of authority or power, who's looking at this young woman, young African woman, and saying, "You're not at my level." And she says, "Oh, but I am."
Yeah.
So that was powerful. So check out if you want to see that. Check out Queen in that episode. Absolutely. And then just follow along with Tangelic. You'll see constantly posts that Toufiq is putting out about what Queen is doing, you know, around the continent. So great to see. Then we got into some fun. We did a 2-part episode, first ever 2-part. We want to extend the conversation because now we said, okay, greenwashing is just such a big factor in this sector, and we keep talking about it kind of as subtext of these episodes. Let's just get into that and actually talk about greenwashing. So we broke it down in 2 parts. We talked about what it is, how it presents itself. We called out a lot of companies who have been put on blast for greenwashing. So if you want to hear some of the companies, and this is a very short list comparatively to how many companies have leveraged the green sector for their own nefarious intents, be it completely insidious and villainous, down to they're just trying to capitalize and they don't exactly know what to do. And we learned a lot about that. So what were your takeaways from that? That was fun.
So cool. I mean, I love deep diving. I'm a nerd at heart. So it's so cool to get, you know, 2 hours of us just talking about a topic, especially a topic that has so many ways to go. You know, we could have done a whole season on greenwashing, and we kind of did, right?
Whole season. So, easy. Right.
There is so much to talk about, but I think the main thing with greenwashing that I want people to understand is it is a very deliberate thing that happens. And at the end of the day, it's one of those things when we blame the system for doing wrong, we have to be able to name what that wrong is. And greenwashing is one of those wrongs that if we don't name, just goes under the radar. You know what I mean? And I think as we deep dove more, it became even more clear the ways that it happens that are quote unquote subtle. But really, if you just take a second, they are banking on people not taking a second to get away with a lot of things.
Yeah, there were two things that I learned that still actually hold true: how clueless I personally am when it comes to greenwashing. I know more now, and I'm still as confused as I was before, which leads me to the second part. Like, we have to ask one more question, be just slightly more discerning. Yeah. They're saying this. Is this in fact, if I'm going to spend my time, effort, and money on anything, I need to be a little bit more aware. Now, we talk about this in many episodes in this season, and we've talked about before. We all should take some personal responsibility over our impacts. The reality is there's a lot of guilt thrown on the individual that we're going to talk about this specifically because I thought it was a great quote. I'm going to bring it up now, and I'll tell you why I'm bringing it up now later. It's like reverse bearing the lead there. That if we don't recycle that Coke can, we're the problem. And the reality is these levers are being moved at much, much higher levels. So I want to take personal responsibility, and I want to speak truth to power and hold those who are actually moving big rocks and making big impacts for the potential of positive, but mostly at this moment, negative impacts. So that was interesting in kind of that greenwashing of the discernment, the questioning, understanding, even just understanding some of these companies, like they look green and they use ethereal blue and color schemes and all this. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, this is just a Nestle company? Like,
yeah. Okay. But I think it was really cool because as we were deep diving, this conversation came up of like, how much guilt do we put here? How much guilt do we put there? And then I think our next couple of guests really helped us unpack that.
Yeah. And that naturally just kind of unfolded, which is just okay. Like, we didn't really have a plan for season 2, and it turned out we had a great plan for season 2 in retrospect now, whereas season 3 is much more planned out. And again, we're going to touch on that a little bit as well. So decolonizing climate change. We talked to Stefano Cisternino, who is a journalist in this space, about this, and really insightful, bringing a lot of kind of perspectives that I hadn't considered, and felt like he was taking on a lot of fights that you and I personally are very interested in. So it was nice to kind of see somebody out there who's carving a little bit of a lane, a path, and maybe allowing us to kind of go in their wake a little bit. So Stefano was a powerhouse for sure. What did you have some takeaways from that episode?
I think my main thing is he was so good at explaining theory to practice. There's a lot of things that we talk about up here, you know, in the high level. And him being a journalist, having that firsthand, but also having the career he does. He's been in so many rooms and so many talks, and he's so good at just being able to pick up like, yep, that's the same lie I heard a year ago, and that's the same, you know?
Yes, exactly.
And it's like, it's all this theory that you read about of how do people lie? And he's like, no, I can tell you, I was there. And that was awesome, especially coming from a post-colonial academic that is so enmeshed. You know, the climate crisis conversation is so global north centric that, you know, every time we talk about anything global south, we kind of like mystify it. And he was very good at like, we don't have to mystify it. There is practice here that we can just like start doing. Yeah. We don't have to talk about it like it's a myth.
Right. It was very practical in the way he approached it. The note that I put down for myself was active listening. He mentioned it. I mentioned how it's something that I struggle with and that I work on deeply, personally. Active listening, the ability to listen to the people in the global south, for example, and apply solutions with that in mind first, versus the modality we see so often is, you know, the global north, the intellectuals, the academics, the elites are going to solve all your problems. And then we force a round peg in a square hole because it's not the way that they actually operate. It's not culturally relevant. It's not relevant to their infrastructure, their processes, their way of life, their governments, their financial and economical systems. So that to me was the biggest thing. If we spent more time with active listening versus trying to force the fix on everybody, we might actually get a lot further. That to me was the biggest takeaway from
100%.
Stefano.
Yeah. And I think he said it in such a way that it's so easy to understand, and you don't need to read a white paper. You don't need to be an academic to understand that, you know?
Yeah.
It's as simple as when you ask people, what do you want for dinner? And they tell you, done.
Hey. Imagine that. And then we have to figure out how to cook it, how to get the
right. Yeah, we'll figure that one out. But once we have a plan,
let them tell us.
The plan doesn't come before the goal, does it?
Yeah, there we go. There we go. All right, next episode, we tested out a new model, a 15-minute breaking news type episode, where it was very much sharing the specifics. We talked about the Trump administration's changes to the Endangered Species Act and some of the things that happened downstream from that. For me, this was the most uncomfortable episode that we've done so far, because we didn't understand exactly how we were going to navigate into the political sphere and how we were going to have open-ended questions, yet still we have personal points of view. And when you're in the clean energy space, it's become so politicized that it's almost like you're on one side of this debate or the other. So difficult from that perspective. And even the imagery and everything that we went with were a little bit more jarring. You know, Trump standing on a turtle.
Yeah. I think we
that's
embraced
the
it.
imagery that we ended up going with for the episode. So it was pretty specific in its direction and intent in the end, even though we didn't understand that going into it, because we wanted to just stay open to understanding the subject at hand. But the 15-minute episode, much more quick, much more just sharing what's happening. I know you're planning to do more of those as we go forward, because I think it's an important way to just have a differentiation from the 30-minute episode and be able to share something that's real and now. So what else kind of came up from you from that episode? I think
for the whole team, it was a new format, because for Toufiq, who does our beautiful thumbnails, you know, he got creative and did that. For Nosy, she does our editing, and that was a different editing format that we used. So I think for the whole team, it was different, and it was really rewarding. I think we all really enjoyed how it came out. And it's the kind of thing where, like I said, season 2 was so experimental. We were like, we're just going to try it. And if we don't like it, then we're just going to scrap it. And when that episode came out, we were all like, oh my God. And I think it was really fun, just, you know, from that perspective. The topic is sad, obviously, but I think it's the kind of episode that allows us to share with all of you something that is happening in a capsule that might be relevant for bigger discussions that we have later.
Yeah, and quick in the 15-minute, sub 15 minute, I should say. I think that one was 12, 13 minutes, but sub 15 minutes will be the goal for that. So let's say 10 to 15 minutes, a little bit quicker hitting, a little bit like here's what's happening. And then you can kind of go down that rabbit hole further if you feel like that, versus the more storytelling method that we typically apply, that more human storytelling method. So a little bit different approach. And so check that one out and let us know what you think of it. And then if there's other topics that people want to see covered in that way as kind of the news cycle is happening, let's go, because that's the goal with those, is plug them in as they're real time. So there may be season 3 going, and then all of a sudden there's kind of a bonus episode that happens because something relevant is happening in the moment. That's kind of the modality that'll be. And then we moved into talking about a little bit of kind of personal sustainability. But this episode kind of went in a lot of different directions that I didn't expect. When we talked to Claudia Cordova, who had a great kind of personal story, and her personal story was so deeply connected to the work that she's doing with supporting a lot of people looking to go green. And her story, talking about how somebody could use, instead of having disposables, they could just wash certain items and be able to reuse them. And they said, we don't have water. And it clicked for her that her, again, solution, her more, highfalutin idea of what you can do, because that's the conversations that people in the sector are having. When you go to the real world application of it, they don't have water. There's no way for me to do this green thing that you're trying to get me to do. Changed her perspective, changed her approach. Really appreciated hearing that. And also her own personal struggle, right? She talked about going to a golf course with her father and seeing this utopia and realizing, like, that's such a disconnect from the reality of most people's lives and how potentially wasteful and how a golf course can kind of be the manifestation of so many of the wrongs that she's trying to right, but still loving her father and the relationship and that leisure time and having that outlet. And how do we balance all these things? It's there are no right answers, it feels like sometimes. It was a powerful conversation. What about for you?
In this season, we talk so much about balancing, right? Balancing your relation to other people, balancing things. With the story that she told us about, you know, not having access to water, it brought me back to the conversation we had with Dr. Kamabonta, and in our first ever episode of we can't talk about just transition without access to energy. Like, so many things just kept coming back. And I think bringing that personal perspective, it was something I deal with this a lot. You know, I'm very green brained. And in my personal life, there's a lot of people who are like, you're so annoying. Like, and I'm like, it's okay. I'm just asking you to do this. I'm just asking you to do that. And it's the same thing she does with her father. There are some fights you just have to let go for the peace of community. But other times it is just about balancing, you know, teaching people through doing that it's not as hard as they might think. You know what I mean? So it's really interesting to have someone put that into words.
Well, and then we went into our next episode where we talked about the end, the collapse of it all. Which was so
fun.
Right? It was slightly more uplifting than I thought, right? We've had some existential crisis on this show, you know, talking about the 10,000 years of impact and how we're never going to be able to change all this, you know, with Professor Murphy. And so I thought maybe talking to Eric Schunkweiler, Eric Schunkweiler, I want to make sure I get his name right. And he's a prepper, but he's a kind of a leftist prepper. And we often think of that being more of a right-wing type thing in your bunker with a whole bunch of canned beans and guns. And there was plenty of things where like, okay, that still sounds like a prepper that I imagined. But there was a lot of things that he brought up, which this leftist perspective was very different, much more community driven than I had imagined, less isolationist than I had imagined. And the fact that the joy that came to his life was letting his chickens out and running around, I was so connected to that part of the story that it really made a lot of what he was saying a lot more relatable. And I think that's a difficult thing when you're talking about some of the prepper. It seems so off based with the way that most people are going to live, act, and view the world. That was my big takeaway there. The joy of the chickens made everything else kind of sink in even deeper for me personally.
He just had so much joy, not about the end of the world. I want to make that clear. I think his joy came from community. You know, the leftist side of the prepper discourse is that I loved how he said it. If you want to survive by yourself, fine, you get those bragging rights. But like, who are you brag to? You know? It's like the whole point of surviving is living with people. That's why we talk about adaptation when it comes to climate change. That's why we work on clean energy. That's why we, you know, clean the rivers. Whatever it is that we're doing in terms of climate action is to protect community at the end of the day. And I think it was really interesting in his view of like, yeah, that's the whole point. I think he did the analogy of like, you put your mask on to help the other person, not to put it on while the plane crashes.
Exactly. Put your mask on first and then help others. Right. And then you help others. That's the next step there. Yep. I was in sync with that for sure. Even though I may not be living and making decisions the way that Eric is, I could understand now how that is much more of a relatable 100%. Possibility and perspective and way of life. So then we talked to John Pabon,
the cool uncle,
author. And that's my takeaway. I'm going to jump. Cool uncle. That's always an approach that I take. It's always my goal. He nailed cool uncle. Stefano nailed cool uncle. Eric ended up coming off kind of cool uncle. So I was very taken by that, you know, even in the titles of his book, he was breaking down the preconceived notions of what you expect to hear when you're talking about sustainability. Was very good at making, again, those points very relatable. When he talked about, you know, it's just like, here's a no bullshit plan to save the planet. Like, okay. Like that's how we're going to talk about this. Let's talk about it then. and it felt very raw and real.
Exactly.
So what else were you feeling from John's episode?
I mean, it felt like just chatting to someone at the pub, to be honest, over a pint. It was great. I think mainly he is in a very unique intersection where he is very no BS while also trying to help businesses, which many of us would point to as culprits of a lot of this, to do better. And the way he explained it to us, I believed it, you know? It's like, if a business wants to do better, they will. Whatever their motivation is, they will do better. But he's very focused on being genuine. You can't just do it for, you know, for the F of it, to be honest.
And then he said, you know, he's working with companies, like you mentioned, that, you know, may be guilty of past regressions. And sometimes they're full of it and they're trying to sell him on helping him sell, you know, their product, their initiative, whatever. He talked about firing clients. And as somebody who's been in the consulting space for a long time too, when I learned how to fire a client, it empowered me in a way that I could pick the projects that made the most sense to me. And sometimes you're pushing mud uphill, 100%. You're trying to fight that good fight, and they just can't get there. But it's worth the effort, I think, in many instances. So that was really great to hear. And then we roll to the last episode of season 2, where we talked to Cool Grandpa.
Cool people on this season.
We talked to Iona Tsiparatis, who's a professor, doctor, engineer, who has been in the renewable space for 45 years, you know, goes to the COPs, is on those stages, speaking at that level, has seen how little action we've done. He talked about, is it too little, too late? Maybe it is. I said, okay, so we're done. The conversation's over. He said, no, how hopeful he was for the future. And the students that he works with in Kenya and beyond was really palpable for me. And his energy was just infectious. It was really powerful to see that he's still locked in at the 45 years of screaming down an empty hallway, of getting people to make changes in this space.
Very convicted to the fight. It's amazing. And I think the way he spoke with such optimism is something that you don't normally hear from people that are so senior in this space. And when I say senior, not old, okay? I mean like very high up, you know, who have the experience he does. And he's still, you know, optimistic, but he's also valuing what young people have to say. And normally in this space, you get a lot of people just being like, oh, you're just naive, you'll get over it. You know, like being vegetarian is a phase, wanting to do green stuff is a phase. It's like you always get dismissed in that way because it's like, oh, you haven't seen the realities of the world. He's seen it all, and he's like, do you know what? Put your shoes on, let's go. We got to keep going. And that was amazing.
We had some cool uncles, cool grandpas, greenwashing, storytelling, balance. We had youth perspective. It really ended up being a season that had some continuity, even though we were just testing and experimenting and feeling it out. At the end, there was really a thread that we pulled through. So very proud of us for the work of season 2. Please go check out any and all of these episodes. Check out season 1 as well. You can also find a recap of season 1 if you kind of want to get a sense of what happened in season 1, which was much more of a pure kind of one-to-one interviewing experts in their spaces was season 1, kind of more traditional, that style. Again, season 2, more experimental, a few different threads and themes that we're focused on. And then season 3 coming up, we're going to tease that. First, I have to share with everybody some personal news. I am wrapping my own time with Tangelic now, as so many other projects close to my heart have really started to ramp up. And so Victoria is moving on without me. Very sad moment, but we will be connected forever through the stories that we have told. They will live on forever. And I'm excited to see where Victoria takes season 3, because I know I've helped plan it out, and I'm excited to see what happens with it. And definitely, you know, anybody check out my stuff. Go follow me on Instagram at Jensen Cummings, and I'll keep you updated on everything that's happening. But the story of food, look out for that. Best Served podcast, more happening there. So I'm excited about all that. But Victoria's got to carry the torch without me from here for Tangelic Talks.
No, but I've learned a lot from you, and I'm sure the audience will miss you a lot. So thank you for your such human perspectives. To be honest, if we hadn't started this with you, I don't know how human this would have been. So I'm quite the nerd.
I'm not smart enough to keep it at an intellectual level, so I had to keep us
Sure.
very grounded out of
Undersell,
necessity.
sure.
But it worked.
It worked.
It worked. This show really worked.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of the 25 episodes that we've done. And I know that we've laid the foundation for like really great things to happen. So share with us, tease the teaser, because next episode, you're going to be digging in with your new co-host, talking in more depth about season 3, but just tease your new co-host and what's happening in season 3. As
So for season 3, we have Andres joining us, and you'll be able to get to know him a lot better in our episode kicking off season 3. We're going to take a little 2-week break. We have a conference happening on the 14th of August. So if you want to join us and you miss us a little, just come join us at the conference. All the links will be in the description. But aside from that, season 3 is going to be focused on the Sunrise Spectrum Initiative, which is a project that Tangelic is running. And we have a lot of pillars. We have a lot of topics. We have a lot of things that we're doing with that project. And we kind of want to dive into it. You guys don't know how much we do at Tangelic. So I think it's time to let you in with an array of guests. We've got a lot of cool guests coming on, a lot of human guests, not that many, white paper experts, which I think is really important. And it's going to be a very human, community focused season where we hear how projects like the Sunrise Spectrum Initiative change lives, but also what is there left to do? What else can we put our energy into? What can you do? How can you get involved? So get ready, because season 3 is going to be crazy, and we're already planning season 4. So strap in.
Yes, let's go. I told them they have to have me as a guest in season
100%.
4. I'll make a triumphant comeback. We'll talk about the story of food, regenerative agriculture, chefs, policymakers, all the things that I'm so passionate about. There's so much intersection. I have the Moringa for Life podcast, which is talking about, soil health and soil biology and growing food and permaculture. So there's just so many intersecting storylines that I'm just grateful for the connections that I'm going to have with Justin, our 2 leaders, Amber, Toufiq, Nosy, yourself, Matt, Queen, just a really great and dynamic team that I know is going to continue to do great stuff, and we'll be connected through our stories and through our work together forever.
Exactly. Well, the internet is forever.
It is forever for now, unless we hit those end times like Eric was talking.
Very true. But look out for that email on, do you want to be a guest on Tangelic Talks?
Yes, I am ready. So thank you, everybody, for the audience that you've been, the interaction that I have, how you've welcomed us into this sector, into this space. This show challenged us to continue to think about the stories that we tell, the impact that we make. It's meaningful. It's worthwhile work. You are a part of that. We could not do this as storytellers, as podcasters, without your engagement, your interaction. So continue to do so and support the show, support the work that Tangelic is doing. We appreciate you all.
Let's talk power, let's talk change. From rural lights to brighter days. Equity rising, voices strong. We're building tomorrow where we all belong. Tangelic Talks, energy, equity, pride. Empowering the world, side by side. A spark becomes a fire, a vision that's true. Together we rise, it starts with you.